Welcome, welcome. Dr. Stephen Hobbs here from the Wealth Movement. Continuing on with the Wellther series with the wonderful, gracious, just so many different things happening in her life, Gabrielle Brick. So welcome, Gabrielle. Welcome back for number 2.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. Well, I'm actually looking out the window and I'm watching a cat go by near the field. And then there's a dog sort of sniffing its way along behind it. They both know each other, so it's okay. But it's just kind of fun to watch it be happening, okay?
Yeah, to watch. That's funny.
Well, when we ended off the last call, and we were chatting about a number of different things from mentorship and movement and clarity, there is one of the words in particular I'd like to just jump back into. And I know we want to make a connection between school at home and the workplace, and there's a very special word that we want to bring out there, but there was another word that has great meaning to me, was ecosystem. And you use that to describe what was going on in some of the business work that you were doing, and I was just wondering, can you just expand on what you mean by ecosystem?
Well, it's both the physical and the esoteric, I think, wrapped in one, because I'm referring to your home space or your workplace as its own environment, yet part of the whole. So, and reflecting upon what we understand in nature, right? You do one thing, it affects everything around it. Everything is interconnected. There's a web that we're always working within. And and so when I think ecosystem of my home or my workplace or an event that I'm doing, it's all connected to the whole, but it's also its own environment.
Yeah, I like that. And I really like the word because the flip side of that is ecosystem. Oh. Just flip out the G and the C, and ecosystem is a lot of what we talk about when we think about ourselves, in a sense. An ecosystem is when we're working with the bigger picture and our lives. And that's why I really like the word eco and ecosystem. And I appreciate what you're saying there, is because the question sort of that begs, how important is ecosystem, right? And ecosystem to this notion of like nutrition and movement and neurosciences, some of the work that you're going to be doing with the parents and children, because then we'll make a leap into the workplace. But how does this ecosystem work with your efforts right now?
Well, as I mentioned in our last conversation, it happened. I decided to delve into this project because of my ecosystem, right? My personal, the macro and the micro, right? My life purpose, as well as the container of my home and my children as a mother, and then as an entrepreneur, right? There's these multifaceted systems within the big system, like we would see in a forest. And how that relates to what school at home is that I'm sort of taking and inviting incredible speakers such as yourself with incredible information and technologies on how to become present and mentor and aware in certain, various different pieces of the ecosystem, and sort of bringing it together in one space so that we can take that information and apply it directly to our individual homes, our individual lives, the individual ecosystem, right? So like there's the whole and the big vision, and then the small pieces that each come together that we can then apply. Like a parent can go into the system, and a child can go into the system and apply the tools and information and philosophies into their own lives. I don't know if am I answering this?
Yeah, it's great, because in a sense, taking care of ourselves as a person is our ego system.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of people, you get the ego out of the way, and I'm going, whoa, 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 hang on a minute.
Yeah,
Don't be throwing out
exactly.
your ego, because in many ways
We
that's
need
what
a little bit.
you need it here for, for protection and take care of yourself. Just don't let it run everything, or else you'd never leave your home, your house, right? You'd never leave your
Right.
ecosystem, your close ecosystem, right?
Right.
So I think that what you're bringing up is how to balance up that dynamic balance of, okay, I've got my ego and I've got my eco. They're both systems. We understand systems interact. I think that's where you're really trying to get at is, and then doing the dance, right? And this would have meaning to you because of your movement days and doing all that dance. It's really a dance, true?
It is.
Yeah.
It
And
is. It is. And we can choose to approach life in various ways. And I had a wonderful session with um, an ancestral healing person. I forget what it was called. It's what it's called in the moment. But he reminded me in the session, he's like, you dance your way through life, dance. Like, we can choose to fight. We can choose to sit back and watch. We can choose to dance, right? What does the moment require? What's that thing in you that helps you dance? To me, if I look at a situation and it's challenging, how can I dance with it? Immediately takes the edge off and opens the space for creative thinking, because now it's something I can move with.
yeah, get you your clarity is something we were talking about earlier, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I love the dance metaphor because, well, you could do a little bit of hip hop, or maybe you want to do some salsa, or you want
Yeah.
to do a twist, right? Or you
Mm-hmm.
want to do a twisty salsa, right?
Yeah.
You can,
Okay.
right? You can play with it so many ways, right? And that's so important. And I think we've sort of been hinting at it, but let's take it. You're talking about school at home, an ecosystem, and we're playing with that. And in your own words, as an entrepreneur, and you're going to have staff with you, volunteers with you at times, how do you take this dance into the workplace, what we're talking about? How do you take it in?
Because what I'm thinking about is, how do I describe something that feels very esoteric to me, that feels, I'm a feeler, I feel my way, right? um, I'm also at the same time acutely aware mentally, and so it's this dance of mental awareness, and also what does the environment feel like. And by feeling my way into it and observing what's happening, the combined information is what I feel allows me to come to a conclusion as to what that moment or environment needs. The workspace, what does my staff need? When I run a kitchen, people have said to me, I'm amazed at how calm you are. We're feeding 40 people. I'm in charge of the kitchen, the menu, all of it, and my staff. And yet I make sure we take time together for a break and sip a cocktail that we made, have a bite of the dish that we made off to the side, right? Like, I think it's important to bring that sense of, I think it's an awareness, or maybe even I'm just going to take it into the spiritual. Like, at some point we have to have reverence for everything, right? And so there's gratitude and reverence for the work I do, for the project I'm doing, for the time with my children, for the time alone, right? And the quiet, for the fun times at the carnival or whatever it is. There's a reverence, an awareness, a presence. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, that's the piece. And if we can, gently hold on to that piece, we don't want to crush it, right? We want to hold it like a heart in our hands. We want to hold that. And that awareness and that presence constantly brings about more awareness to the ever-changing ecosystem that is always going to need modification in one way or the other, clarity, softness, toughness, whatever it is. And that applies both to home and work, right? Is it go mode right now? Or is it like, let's just sit back and take this in for a minute?
Yeah, so you probably wouldn't, in your cooking scenario, it wouldn't look like Hell's Kitchen on TV.
Exactly. And I come from corporate kitchens, and I vowed I would do something very different.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine that actually happening for you, because that would be a really great way to tap into what everyone is bringing in to that meal, right?
Well, and that's a good point. I want to touch on that because we talk about the ego, right? And the ego system. And there's a relinquishing as the executive chef, right? That I have to do
Yes.
in really allowing the food and the space to be co-created, right? And that is also a big part of holding and the ecosystem, and knowing where to plug in and where to unplug, and step back and allow the others to take over and share their fire and passion and beauty and creativity.
I would go so far, Gabrielle, to say that I don't think you co-create your environment. You eco-create your environment.
Yes.
And that's what makes it so different for you. And that's why I so enjoy when we have our conversations, is that you have actually gone into eco-creation with what you're doing. You've got to go through co-creation to get there, just like you got to go through creation. You got to understand what it is to be a creature to be able to do those things, right?
Right.
But listening to you, like even today, is and just imagining what that time cooking with those people was about, right? That would be eco-creation. That would be like a really good example of eco-creation. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I think I might have to adopt that into my actual language. Dr.
Because it would
Stephen
be,
Allen.
yeah, it'd be great for the retreats and things, is that, hey, let's get involved with some eco-creation as we're cooking our meals.
Well, and it brings me to the conversations you and I have had around education and eco-architecture, right? And everything becomes part of the whole, how we do it, how we choose to participate. It's fascinating, because when you really start to think about that, you see the continuity thread, you see the connection, and how far back it goes, all the moments that lead up to this moment.
And I bet when you go into your kitchen for the very first time, which is what I would be encouraging people who are listening as entrepreneurs who are going to end up with people as people navigation, is when they first walk in, you're sort of getting a sense of the lay of the land, right? Because they could have come in off a session, they could have just be arriving all together, and you've got to then dance with that group who are going to be assisting you with the food, just like you've got to assist that group to dance with you when they first arrive to start on that project.
Yeah.
Which I believe goes back to, I think, is a really important ethic that doesn't get talked about, like respect and fairness. Hospitality. Welcoming those who've not arrived yet. Is that not what you're doing when you are doing your eco-creation in your kitchen?
Yes.
You're showing hospitality when they walk in.
Wow.
If entrepreneurs were to do that with even their customers or their clients and their staff, is to be in that place of hospitality as an ethic. Does that take you anywhere in terms of thinking?
Game changer. Game changer, right? If we took that into the workplace as we know it, the corporate world, right? And I think Google and places like that, they touch on it. There's some Fortune 500 companies now that are getting into certain personality testings so they can make sure that hey, I want you on the team, but where are you best supported? Where is your magic? And let's place you in the department where you really get to shine your light, you know? And so I think it's happening in the world. And let's take it a step further, right? If we could approach every moment and each person, boss, non-boss, volunteer, employee, right? However it is laid out, in that space of welcoming, that hospitality, that knowing every moment is brand new. And there's a place in the home to connect to in the workplace, right? We would have a very different world.
Think about that from your school at home program as well. Parenting, welcoming parents, welcoming the children through hospitality into that day's learning.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it has been such, you know, even for me, you know, blown away at, you know, some of the application in this philosophy and watching it work and watching my children expand in ways that at first were theories, right? And oh, now I'm seeing the tangible evidence. And also witnessing my own humility as they, you know, I find our children really, if we, you know, they're the gurus, you know. they're the ones, in my opinion, with, yes, I'm the adult and I have to hold the structure and blah blah blah, all those things, but you know, that to me is obvious and common sense. Put that aside and you step back to this ecosystem and the ecosystem, and you really welcome your child into their space, right? Which is our space, but really giving them the opportunity to feel into it, because we've felt into our space in a powerful way. We're adults, and honestly, when we open the gateway for them to be welcomed into their space instead of our space, I find personally a magic unfolds in the dynamic of my relationship with my children, in their ability to learn and their desire to learn, and in what I learn by simply observing them feeling safe in their environment, in their body, in who they are, in their ability to express themselves. You know, it's mind-blowing.
Would you have done the same thing in those kitchens where you had those people come in to help you do the cooking? Would you have done the same thing with them?
Absolutely. I think it's the one and the same, right? And that is the practice, right? That's the martial art, if you will. That's the movement, is understanding the fluidity, the emotional fluidity that's necessary in being able to, you know, hold that space to constantly invite, to constantly welcome, to constantly be present.
So as we get close to wrapping up this call, there must be something that you would like to share with the listeners around what we've talked about today, around ecosystem, how it sort of plays itself out in movement that comes from your practice. Let's not come from the theory of what it might be, but if you go back into something that's real, that you could touch,
Mm-hmm.
give us that example, and what is it that you would like to pass along to who's ever listening to this at this point in time?
I'm going to start by sharing the phrase, which is my motto. And it's something I live by fiercely and gently and wholly. And it's that there are no rules, only choices. And when I am having a day where I really need to remind myself of that, listen, you know, I'm a single mom, I'm twin boys, running, you know, multiple businesses, And I have to have tools in place, right? Whether that's to know when to slow down and breathe, to immediately act, you know, and it's about responding versus reacting. And I think if there's one thing to take away, is that there are no rules. There are zero rules. You know, every place that we think we're trapped or that we can't move or we feel stifled or oppressed is our own attachment to a belief that is no longer serving us. And therefore, it brings us to the choices. What choice are you willing to take in self-love, right? Which will require movement on your part. How will you need to move through the process, right? And in every day, if you can remember that there aren't rules, that there are really only choices in self-love. And while some of those choices may require incredibly difficult moments in time, at the end of that choice, at the end of that walk, the freedom that you will experience in being yourself will be worth everything, because in the end, we all want that truth of freedom in being ourselves fully expressed.
Okay. I have a great sense of that. And I think, because this is number 2 of 3, in terms of the Wellther series with you, we've got another one to go, another great 21 minutes or so. I'd like to take a look at something like passionate in the next one. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because there's an underlying storyline here that you're sharing, and it's bubbling up, and I'm sort of like the word came onto the screen kind of idea. And I think it would be a great place to start when we do 3 of 3, the third of 3. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay. So thank you very much for today. I appreciate it, because I never know quite where these conversations are going to go, and you're just freely dancing with me, and I so appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's always such a pleasure.